Hello, I'm Sharon Coleman. I'm the Youth Services Consultant for the Vermont Department of Libraries. This is my web series called What is Sharon Reading? And it's June, so let's see what we got here. So first, I'm just going to go over really quickly how you get to these videos or how you get to some information. This is the Department of Libraries website, libraries.vermont.gov. If you click on Services for Vermont Libraries, and then click on Children and Teens, either here on the side or in the middle, you will get to my information. There's a ton of information here. The place you want to go is Resources for Children's Services. Here's information on some community partnerships, but if you want specific information on collection development and reader's advisory, you can click there. And here we go. This is my series on what's new. These are the books that I receive in the office from publishers, and I go through the reviews and review about 45 minutes worth for you, picture books on up to YA novels. And then this is my series down here, and this one will be added right there in June. If you want more information on how to use these services, you can come down here to how to use Library Thing. This right here will teach you how to use the system that I use. It's right here, Library Thing, and how to explore it on your own. I recommend that you look at that if you haven't done it already. And here's a little web services discussion about some of the books from the DCF list. All right, moving right along. Let's go here. So this is Library Thing. Like I said, if you're not familiar with Library Thing, take a look at my little instructional video, and it'll give you a sense of how to use this. It's a pretty cool tool. I've been using it for a long time. I have 1,142 books in here. This really is only cataloging the middle grade and high school books that I read. I don't catalog picture books. All right, so let's see what we got here. I stopped right about here. These are sorted. If you look at Library Thing, you can sort them different ways. I have these sorted according to entry dates. So if you scroll up to the top, you can sort by entry date. So these are the ones that I entered the latest. You can tell the ones that I'm currently reading because they don't have any information in them right here. And you can see the copyright date and my little tags and my stars. Okay, so let's start with Penderwoods in Spring. If you haven't read Penderwoods in Spring, I highly recommend that you do. It's the fourth book in the Penderwoods series, and it's wonderful. One thing I will note, though, is that the kids are getting older, especially Batty, who's, she was the baby, and now she's getting older, and she's asking some tough questions, and there is a very difficult storyline through this book, and that's that her mother, she died of cancer, which we know from the beginning, but you come to find out that her mom had to make a really tough decision because she had cancer while she was pregnant with Batty, and she had to decide, or Batty thinks she had to choose between the baby and saving her own life and getting treatment. So running through this entire book is this conflict that Batty's having with her sisters about being the youngest, but also being unwanted and feeling like she's the reason that her mom's not around. So this is some tough stuff here. It's still wonderfully well written, hilarious. The oldest daughter is in college. She comes home a couple of times. There's still a very tight group, but of course, it's changing. So I highly recommend it if you've got Penderwoods fans. But you just, they're getting older. It happens. So something to keep in mind. A little bit on the older side, Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda. If you have talked to me at all in the last month, you know that I adore this book, and I am telling everyone, if you have a high school library or if you are a public librarian, you need to buy this book immediately, right now. Go buy it. This book is phenomenal. It is funny, and it's also just a really well-written story. It's a story about a 17-year-old high school student who's gay, and he's not out, but not for any particular reason. He just doesn't feel like coming out. and making a big deal about it. And he has this online relationship with this boy whose name he doesn't know. He knows he goes to his school. It's a large high school, but they go by code names. And this boy's code name is Blue, so he doesn't know who he is. He has suspicions, but he doesn't know. And they have this very tight relationship, and they share a lot. So this book is partially narrative, but partially their emails, and their emails are adorable. So what happens is that one of the kids at school sees his emails that he's been writing back and forth, and tries to blackmail him. And what he wants from him is he wants a date with his best friend. And Simon's best friend really isn't interested. So he's not as concerned about himself being outed. He's afraid of Blue, because Blue is not out at all. Anyway, there's, the drama and the intrigue, and in the end, I promise you'll be dying to know who Blue is, and when you finally find out, you'll melt. It's adorable, and it's funny, and it's sweet, and it's happy, and it's exactly what this genre needs. There's so much high drama, there's so much depression and sadness in the GLBT genre, and we need more happy, and this one is definitely happy. It has that little happily ever after ring at the end, and it will make your insides mush, I promise. So you should definitely read it. Also, the cover is adorable. I don't know, there's just something cute about it. So everyone I've handed this book to has loved it, so I highly recommend it. All right, next, Blackbird Fly. This book is younger. I love the cover. It's cute. It's not my favorite book, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's about a girl. Her name is Apple, and she's from the Philippines, and she's very embarrassed by the fact that her mom doesn't speak English very well. They live in Louisiana, so she's having a hard time fitting in, and she feels like her mom doesn't fit in, that she doesn't fit in. Her nickname is Apple, and she feels like that's terrible. And the kids in her middle school, of course, are terrible, because kids that age often are, and they have a thing called a dog log, and they have the ugly kids on it, and Apple, her name ends up on this log, and she feels terrible about it. Anyway, she meets a new kid, and it's kind of cute. The new kid doesn't really see... It has a family, too, that he's embarrassed of, but doesn't really see the problem with Apple's family, and doesn't understand why she's so hard on her mother. And they become friends, and they start bonding over the Beatles, which is adorable. It's a little didactic. It's a little much. It's a little bit more like bullying is bad, everyone must fit in, kind of happily ever ending. Some of the kids might not like that it's so perfect at the end. However, it's a good book. You could hand it to some younger kids. I really doubt that 8th graders are going to like it. It's recommended to 5th to 8th grade. I scrolled down so I could see. I think it's more 4th, 5th, 6th. Just in terms of appeal. It's cute. There's cute teachers, there's music, whatever. But I think the bullying part of it is really just, it's kind of lackluster. It's not that realistic, especially in how it resolves itself. So, if your library needs that kind of thing, you can buy it, but it's not a necessary purchase. I gave it 3.5 stars because it's okay, but it's not fabulous. All right, The Truth Commission, I read. It's a high school book. This book is a little strange. Susan Juby's fabulous, but this book, I don't know, it warms up. It took me some time to get into it, which always makes me hesitate because I think kids are less patient than I am, and I have no patience. So this is about a kid her name is Normandy Pale, which I think is a hysterically funny name, and she is in high school, in this special arts high school, and she has this older sister, Kira, who wrote a graphic novel and became really, really famous. And she's back at home, and they don't really know why. Her parents treat her kind of like she's a fragile thing because she's an artist, and she's been helping them out with the bills and stuff, so they don't really question her. And so she kind of comes and goes in her own time, which is very strange. And she seems depressed. She's been hiding in the closet and writing more, and her agent keeps calling asking for her. Anyway, in the meanwhile, Normandy's friends have started this thing called the Truth Commission, where they've decided to try to get the truth out of people, which sounds obnoxious and kind of is. And so they try to go after certain people in the school that they feel like have secrets, and they try to dig the secrets out of them. They start with the person who works the front desk in the office, and try to figure out why she's so grumpy, and then they try to get on the popular kid to find out what her problem is, and somebody has like some secret art project going on, and they're trying to dig up all these secrets. Meanwhile, Normandy has all these secrets at home, and when you unwrap the secrets at home, it's pretty interesting. I don't want to ruin the end for you, but once it gets into it, it's very interesting. The whole beginning part in the high school, though, I felt like lacked a little momentum. I didn't care that much, but the stuff with Normandy's parents and sister are fascinating, and in the end, it's wow. It's really fascinating ending. So I think the kids will like it if they can get into it. If you have kids who are really good readers, they could get into it. But you know, it doesn't get started right away. It's recommended for grade 9 and up. I'm not really sure why. There might be some talk of drugs in it. Usually I tag that in here. Oh, right. There's a story about rape. So yeah, you can take that how you like. Anyway, not a necessary purchase, but could be interested for some of your kids. Moving on to something I liked a little better, The Walled City. This book, I listened to it. It was on Overdrive, and I thought the cover looks interesting. Well, I'll go ahead and listen to it. This book is fascinating. The cover does it no justice at all. This book, it's multiple perspectives, and it's completely trippy. It's dystopic, but it's also based on a real city I'm trying to remember, Singapore? I don't mark my words on that. It's called a walled city, and it was a real thing that happened. Google it. And it's this city in Asia, I want to say Singapore, where it was a city that was a fort, and there was some sort of war, and nobody claimed the property inside the fort. And so the fort became this kind of center of lawlessness, and until it was broken down, I think in the 90s. So this was based on that real thing, and it's fascinating. So these people live in the walled city. In the walled city, there's no government. There's government outside, and if you leave the walled city, then you are subject to the laws of the outside land. When you're inside, there's drugs and violence and prostitution and all sorts of crazy stuff, and there's nobody who really cares about it. So it's walled and it's contained, and there's a lot of poverty and a lot of gangs and a lot of violence. So the different characters in it are fascinating. So there's a prostitute who was sold into prostitution, and she doesn't really have a family, and so she becomes the prize of a diplomat, and she has a tiny little window, and so she meets a boy through the window, and then you have a boy who has this mysterious timeline, and we don't know what he's counting down to, but he's counting down to something, and he is trying to find someone that it's very mysterious. It kind of drops you into this really dark, it's very well described. The description of this book are so good. You can smell this decrepit city. It is so dark and violent. So it's fascinating because you have these kind of kids who are trying to find their way through the city, and they get involved. I think there are 4 different voices, and they get involved with drug traffickers, prostitutes. There's a mob, some sort of gangster organization, kind of gang organization that runs the city, and of course you don't want to cross them, and so these kids are all wrapped up in it, and it's very mysterious. And meanwhile, Di, this one of the main characters, is counting down, and you don't know why he's counting down. When you find out, your head will explode. Anyway, I'm not going to ruin it for you. It's fascinating. It's violent. It's a great adventure story. It's a mystery. It's a little bit of dystopia. Plus, I think this could be a good book discussion book, or a good classroom book, because you could do some research on the real world city and talk about some of the ways that they allowed this to happen, and why, while this lawlessness persisted for so long, and then why it eventually was toppled. I think the kids will really be interested in it. School Library Journal says grades 9 and up. I would agree with that. It is pretty hardcore. At first, I got really confused with the characters. I was listening to it, though. It might be a little clearer in print. I really liked this book. It was a good, gritty adventure for kids who are looking for something that's urban. There's prostitution, but there's no romance in it. So it's not soft at all. It's very hard, and it's good stuff. So. And every character has a wonderful backstory. So I highly recommend it. It's a long book, but it's very good. All right, next, Finding the Worm. This is a sequel to Torp, which was on the DCF list last year. And I have to say, this one was pretty good. This book, Torp, was just hilarious. And yeah, they're recommending it for grades 5 to 8. As you can see, I like to use Amazon. It usually will tell you some basic stuff and give you at least one review, and School Library Journal is a good one. So this book, just like the Penderwicks, Torp is getting older, and there's some tough stuff in here, and I'm going to ruin it for you. This is a huge spoiler alert. Are you ready? Go ahead and plug your ears if you want. His friend Quentin dies. He has cancer and he passes away. And that's the thrust of most of this book. It's still funny. There's still a ton of craziness with the teachers. And there's still, the whole, developing feelings for girls and trying to figure out how to get in trouble and how not to get caught and blah, blah, blah. And he's still writing in his journal. One of the interesting things in this book, one of the many interesting things in this book, is he's going for his bar mitzvah. It's coming up very quickly. He and his friend Quentin, and so he's been talking to the rabbi about life, and he starts talking to him about Quentin and his cancer, and it's kind of heartbreaking, and this rabbi is very wise and really a wonderful adult figure in this book. I really liked this book. However, it is sad, and it's a tough read, and it's not nearly as lighthearted as Torp. So I would just keep that in mind when you're recommending it to kids. I don't want kids to be disappointed when they read this one and they realize at the end that it's not that funny. But it is still really, really good. Love the characters, and there's still some really funny moments in it. Some of the kids who liked Torp might like it. Moving along, how about The Doubt Factory? The Doubt Factory is fascinating. This book, it's by Paolo Bacigalupi. I can never pronounce his name. He wrote Shipbreaker, which is a fantastic book. And so I picked this one up thinking that it would be equally fascinating. It's fascinating, yes. However, it's one of those books, if you've ever read Cory Doctorow, it's got that political message in it that is it's beaten into you so much. And I listened to it, and about 2 or 3 hours before the end, it's a long book, I was done. And I felt like the last 3 hours of the book, so probably the last 200 pages, were unnecessary. They were just kind of political ranting. I'm not sure that there's a lot of appeal for the kids here, although kids who like Cory Doctorow might like this one. It's a lot more political than Shipbreaker or Drowned Cities. So this is about a kid named Alex who is kidnapped. Then she comes to find out it's because her father um, he's a marketing agent, but she doesn't really know what he does. All she knows is he's really rich. And the people who kidnap her, they are trying to stop him because his marketing firm specializes in covering up problems. So things like drug companies that have drugs that kill people, he specializes in getting them out of hot water, or trying to convince people that it's fine, that it's going to be fine. And so this group is convinced that he is to blame for all these deaths from different, mostly it's drug companies, but also things like pesticides and, these crazy big evil companies. And so they kidnapped her to convince her that her dad is evil and to get her dad to stop his evil ways. Fine. And, there's a little bit of Stockholm syndrome, and there's a little bit of, she coming to realize that her father isn't really who she thought he was, and blah, blah, blah. And then it goes on to this kind of ranting kind of political stuff, which is fine. I just don't think a lot of kids are going to have the patience for it. I really liked the first, 200 pages. It was very good. A lot of, she's kidnapped. She has no idea why. She doesn't know where she is or who these people are. She finds out that one of her friends isn't really her friend, and it's really crazy and fast-paced and lots of violence and adventure. But wrapped into it is this whole, I don't know, this political stuff that I thought was a little misplaced. So I struggled to finish it. If you have kids, though, that like that kind of stuff, the political stuff, then, it could be good. It wasn't my favorite. I felt it a little painful to finish. Let's move on to something happier. Unusual Chickens for the Exceptional Poultry Farmer. This is a middle grade book, and it is hilarious. Just look at the cover. This book is fantastic. It's about a girl. She's 12. I reviewed this in the new books section. You might recognize it. And it's just as good as the cover made it seem. So Sophie is Hispanic, and she's just moved to the middle of nowhere. They have a farm, and so she's the only, quote, brown kid for miles, which feels very strange to her. And her parents are trying to start their life. They inherited the farm from her uncle, and they don't know anything about farming. So she really wants to raise chickens, she's decided. And these mysterious chickens start showing up on the farm, and she has no idea what's going on. Now, there's a little magical realism here. I'm not a huge fan of magical realism, but I liked this. I thought it was very cute. She gets pamphlets in the mail from this company that's selling kits to teach people how to raise extraordinary chickens. And so she starts reading these letters, and the chickens do weird things. Like one of them can move things with her mind, and one of them disappears, like vanishes and then comes back. And she's told by this company that she has to protect these chickens from someone who's trying to take them. And so there's all this kind of hijinks, and so she's trying to find these chickens. What happened was her uncle died, and then the chickens kind of scattered, and so she's trying to get them back. And they're all different kinds of chickens. And so in the book, there's a bunch of illustrations, and you'll see pictures of different kinds of chickens, which I think is fascinating because I find chickens fascinating. So there's all sorts of descriptions and things, how to take care of them and crazy stuff. So it's very sweet. I think the kids will love it, especially if you have kids who like farms or who live on farms. They will love this. It's very cute, and it has a little bit of magic, a little bit of, kind of grief, overcoming grief, and coming to terms with the fact that, her uncle's never coming back. So I think it's a great story, and it's also just a really great new to town kind of story. It's told in letters and in narrative, and there's lots of little insets with instructions from this crazy company and quizzes and all sorts of crazy stuff. So I think it's a really fun read. It's a really quick read. It's short, and I think your kids will really love it. So this is for your, third, fourth, fifth graders, and I love it for DCF. So we'll see. See if anyone else loves it. All right, next, a little older. I'm going in order of what I read, so I apologize. It's not as organized, but that's the only way I can keep track. All right, this is a British book. It's called Boys Don't Knit, and if you can get over the inherent sexist kind of statement of this everyone in this book is very, they're very set on the stereotypes. If you can get over that and embrace the humor, this book is pretty funny. So it's British, so there's some British humor. Even though it's Boys Don't Knit, it absolutely has no boy appeal. It's going to be definitely a girl book all the way. It's recommended for 8 and up. The only thing in it that is vaguely objectionable is the alcohol. So use your judgment. I think it could definitely be appealing to younger kids. So anyway, this story is about a kid who has these very goofy friends, and they decide that they have this brilliant idea for bringing liquor to this party that they were invited to, or they're sneaking into. And just picture this, they're in the grocery store, and they have a lookout person over by the cash registers, and then they have people putting bottles of liquor on the bottom level of these grocery carts, and then they run the carts way up to the front and then stop suddenly so that the bottle rolls out towards the cutoff man. It's brilliant, right? Of course they get caught, and so he gets in trouble, and of course his friends disappear, so he's the only one who gets in trouble, and he's put on probation, and he has a probation officer who has him writing in a journal. So this is British, so I don't think something like this would happen in the United States, but you know, it's a little fantastical anyway. So he has to write this journal, and he has to get a hobby. And so at the adult school, he doesn't have that many choices. He can take auto repair with his father, pass, or he can take knitting, or he can take pottery. But he heard that the young, pretty teacher teaches knitting, so he goes with knitting. Come to find out that there was a mistake. The young, pretty teacher actually teaches pottery, not knitting. And so it all becomes ridiculous because he tells his family that he's taking pottery because he thinks that's more manly, but he's really doing knitting, so he's knitting behind their back. It's very strange, and meanwhile, he hasn't told anybody. The end is very fantastical, kind of like middle school movie era, like I could hear the band playing and everything. It's kind of stupidly perfect, but it's cute, and, you know, the whole knitting thing and the fact that, you know, his father has to decide whether he's okay with his son being a knitter. You know, it is very stereotypical, but it is it's a cute story, and I like the characters. So, you know, if you can get over the inherent misogyny, yeah, it's not a terrible book. So anyway, I kind of liked it. All right, this book is hilarious. Prom Goer's Interstellar Excursion. Just take a look at that cover. So this book is absolutely nonsensical. It's hilarious. There are aliens. So, okay. Yeah, and I love this description. Superbad meets Spaceballs. It's exactly right. You need to own this book because I think every kid needs some good kind of goofy summer reading, and this is perfect. So this is about this kid named Bennett who he lives in Roswell, New Mexico, and he doesn't really fit in, and he has this next door neighbor. He plays the guitar all the time with the windows open, and he writes songs for his next door neighbor who he's in love with, and she's like the most popular girl in school, so of course he doesn't really know her. And one day he sees her outside crying, and so he works up the courage to go and talk to her, and he does, and she's like, I need to get out of here, I need to go get my motorcycle fixed, or she has a motorcycle, and so they drive into the middle of the desert to go get her motorcycle fixed, and while they're out there, they are abducted by aliens. Course. Well, he's rejected because he's not good enough for the aliens, but she is taken, and she, before she's abducted, she has agreed to go to the prom with him. So he doesn't want to lose his prom date, and so he tries to figure out how to, how to find her. And so he goes to an In-N-Out Burger, and he sees this tour bus, and he knocks on the door because they've, of course, ordered all of the hamburgers in the entire restaurant, so there's no more food, and he's starving because he's like 16 and he's always starving. So he knocks on the door of the tour bus, and it's full of aliens, and they invite him in, and come to find out they are an interstellar rock band, and they are kind of has-beens, and they have adopted several humans who've ridden along with them. Each one of them is hilarious and has their own story. One of them is a ram-type creature who hides in the closet, and the driver is this like crazy kind of alcoholic goofball who is like a has-been rock star from whatever, and they go to different solar systems to perform, and they don't have a lot of money because they're not as popular as they used to be. They've lost their touch. So anyway, he gets on a ride with them and says, I have to find my friend. And he's watching interstellar television and sees a reality show. It's kind of like a National Geographic program, and there is a show on about humans, and they have captured a few humans and put them into a natural habitat, which happens to be a mall. And they watch them chase each other and eat French fries and get fat. And they, provoke all sorts of wackiness. And she is running around the mall, and he sees her and is like, I have to find her. But of course, they're on tour and they're trying to, go places to play with their band. And so he has to stick with them to find her. The whole thing is ridiculous. It's deeply hysterical. It's silly, and I loved it. Of course, at the end, all is well, but the whole idea of, putting humans in a shopping mall because that's their natural habitat just cracks me up. And these aliens are freaking funny. So I highly recommend this book. I think this is another one of those books we need more funny, goofy, good books in this world. So highly recommend that one. All right, Challenger Deep. I just finished this book. This book took me a while to read. It is hard to describe. It's wonderful, and your kids will love it. Neal Shusterman is a fantastic author, and this book was inspired by his son, who's schizophrenic, and I didn't realize that. But so he and his son wrote this kind of together, and his son did all the illustrations, and the illustrations are just pen and paper drawings, but they are haunting. So a lot of this is inspired by reality, which is it's really troubling when you read this. So it's a brilliant story, but it's very complicated and very heavy, and so it took me a long time to read. So it's a story about Caden, and you have two stories that are being interwoven. You have the reality and you have the hallucination. In the reality, you have Caden, and he is a high school student who's having trouble in school, and his parents are worried about him, and so they put him into a mental institution. And of course, he's paranoid, and he thinks they're out to get him, and he doesn't really know why he's there, and he makes friends with some people in the mental institution, and he has this, crazy counselor, and, all these characters. And then there's the hallucination. In the hallucination, he's on a ship called Challenger Deep, and they are on a mission to explore the Mariana Trench, which is the deepest place on the planet. And the ship is crazy. So he has this crazy captain and a parrot who talks, and this masthead that speaks to him, and just these crazy creatures that are attacking the ship. So what happens is that in the beginning, at least this is the way I experienced it, these two stories were very separate, and it was kind of trippy to read the two because I was very confused. So you have this reality, and then you have this hallucination, and I understood that this was his hallucination, but the two didn't really meet together, didn't bump up together until about halfway through the book. And then all of a sudden you start to see that the characters in hallucination are actually mirrors of the characters in the real life. And towards the end, it gets even more complicated because these two stories become so similar that the stories will be started in one and finished in the other, which it kind of blew my mind. It's beautifully written, really descriptive and dark and heavy. You really feel what these drugs and the situation is doing to him. And it's a really moving book. His family is trying very hard, and he is trying very hard. And it's a look into mental illness that we really haven't seen before. Obviously, he has some insight into this. I highly, highly recommend this book. It is a tough read, like I said, not from content necessarily, but I mean, mental illness is tough, but the writing is so intricate. So they recommend it for grade 9 and up, and I think that's probably right. I will definitely talk this up to the GMBA committee. I think it's wonderful, and I definitely think you should read it. So there you go. 2 more. Next one, Wildlife by Fiona Wood. This is another book that I picked up. It was on Overdrive, and I decided to read it. It's an Australian book, and it's a couple years old. And I listened to the whole thing, and I still really don't know what the point of it was. It was a fine book. It's about these kids who have a semester in the wilderness, and so they're away from their families, and they are trying to kind of suss each other out, and fine. And each of them has a backstory that they don't expect. But I didn't really find a lot of plot here, and I might have missed it. I don't know. It got a lot of praise. You can see, best fiction. It's descriptive, that's for sure. And you have one kid who's getting over the loss of her best friend, which is it's multiple perspectives, which is one thing I had a hard time with. The audiobook wasn't particularly well done because I had trouble discerning between the voices. But you have one girl who's dealing with grief. You have another girl who really just isn't into being part of the group, and you have these 2 friends, like one who's being dragged along by her popular, gregarious, crazy friend, and she's trying to figure out if she really should be doing everything that Holly does. And then, of course, there's a boy, and they're kind of ranked in order of popularity, and one of them starts going out with the popular boy, and there's jealousies, and there's intrigue, and there's a lot of kind of backstabbing and tricking each other. So, I mean, it's a story about friendship. The kids will probably like it. It's definitely a good summer book. It's all about outdoors and dorm life and friendship, craziness. But as far as a book goes and literature goes, there's not a lot here, if you ask my opinion. And you can ignore my opinion if you like. It's decent, but not my favorite. Next, The Selection. So this book's a couple years old, and it's been on my reading list forever, and I just hadn't had a chance, but I had it on audio. I listened to a lot of audiobooks, in case you haven't noticed, and I listened to it in 2 days. I loved this book. It was good brain candy. I needed it after listening to and reading all these dark, depressing books. This is good stuff. This is basically The Hunger Games in dresses. Is the way it was described to me, and I think it's completely true. So this is a little dystopia. So instead of the different states like there are in the Hunger Games, you have castes. So there was like World War IV or something, and each person, like each family, was assigned to a different caste, and each caste has a different classification of job, and you are now stuck in that caste. So it's about a girl named America who is in level 5. Level 1 is the prince, and level 8 is like the dirt poor people. So she's level 5, so she's kind of in the middle, and she is in the cast of artists. So she's a singer and a musician, and her family is pretty poor, not a lot of food to spare, and she is in love with a level 6 who's a step lower, and that's the servant caste. And the problem is that there's not a lot of money, and marriage between castes is not okay. Sex before marriage is punishable by death. And there's a lot of things that are punishable by death. And I think marriage between castes is also punishable. It's crazy. There's a lot of different worlds. They love different rules. And so one of the weird things that happen is that the prince, he's now of age, and he needs to find a wife. And so instead of, just finding a wife, they have a competition. It's called the selection, and every eligible girl is able to apply, and then 35 of them are accepted to live in the palace for as long as it takes for him to figure out which one he wants to marry. So she doesn't want to go because obviously she's in love with someone else, but when you're part of the selection, you get a stipend for your family, and you get moved up a caste. So the monetary benefits are huge. So she doesn't really want to marry the prince, but she needs the money. So she's in it for the money, and she really doesn't care about, the crazy gowns and stuff. But it is like a reality show, and there's a lot of backstabbing, a lot of cat fights, and there's some weird Civil War stuff going on. And of course, she starts to fall for the prince, and it's wonderful, brain candy goodness. If you haven't read it, you should. Kids will love this book. It's good, girly princess goodness with a little dystopic twist. All right, so that's all I have for right now. Right now, I just started Vanishing Girls, and I just picked up Lucky Strike. We are starting to read for both G&B and DCF, so hopefully I will get a lot of reading done soon. So happy reading. If there's anything that you think I should be reading that I haven't, please drop me a line. You can find my contact information all over the place. Let's see. If you click here, here's my contact information right here. If you click right there, you'll get my email address. It's sharon.colvin@state.bt.us, or give me a call. I'm happy to, try to get my hands on whatever you recommend. And if there's any questions that you have, please let me know. Have a great month.